Hi there everyone, Lars back with a long overdue D&D discussion brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And we've just been so busy that the D&D centered videos just keep getting kicks to the back. Finally, we're rectifying that. I am here with some fun insights that I didn't expect I would have from doing an all-new campaign of Dungeons & Dragons, but this time in a play-by-post. Now, for those of you who don't know what play-by-post is, this is where you get the entire group together to post all of their actions rather than verbally or in person discussing how you're going to play. This is something that took me a fair bit to get used to because I'm so used to the rapidity of just being able to say, okay, so this is what's happening, immediately get a reaction, and then everyone within the party confers about the best strategy. You've got the face of the party talking things up, schmoozing it up with their charisma. You've got the tank taking on all of the action. You've got the rogue doing roguishness and the ranger failing at everything that they're supposed to do. And I can say that as someone who plays a ranger. So this was different because the pacing is all over the place. The play-by-post style is meant to allow people with radically different schedules, and especially in our party's case, all over the planet, to contribute when they can, and to try to keep the story going as best you can with everyone's ridiculous schedules. And while it does take a bit to get used to, I've been enjoying it, and I've gotten to know a lot of really cool cats, again, all over the world in this game. And it's allowed me to also get some new perspectives and some new advice, not just for playing Dungeons & Dragons, but also for writing. So in this video, I want to address 5 different lessons that I have so far learned. And number 1 is this: you are not the hero. Of course, you may be playing a heroic campaign, but I'm talking about you, the player, and you, your character. Sure, within the story you may be the hero, but in a play-by-post, it is very easy, if you're someone like me who is at his computer a whole lot throughout the day, to constantly pop on in and just be contributing all the time, and then to start dominating the conversation and dominating the narrative. That's not cool. Dungeons & Dragons is a community storytelling experience. It's cooperative. Everyone is supposed to have a chance. Everyone's supposed to have a fair shake. No one person should be dominating more of the conversation, more of the adventure, more of the story than anyone else. Sure, there's always going to be more outspoken characters, and sure, within certain plot points of the campaign, with certain side quests and side stories, some characters and some players are going to shine more than others, and that's always going to happen. But no one player and their character should come to dominate the entire story. Otherwise, it just gets really boring and it crowds everyone else out. This was something that I had to again relearn, even though I know that Dungeons & Dragons is a community storytelling experience. When we're writing out, I'm like, woohoo, I love writing. I can write so much, and I know all this stuff about my character. I managed to resurrect Zach from the Baldur's Gate experiment that never really got anywhere, and now put him on into this story. And it's been a ton of fun, but I got to the point where I was like, wait a second, whoa. Zach is beginning to dominate way too much. This isn't any fun. This isn't me writing a book in these posts. This is me interacting with all these other great players, with all of these other great characters. And that's what it's got to be. Now then, how can you adapt this for writing? Well, actually, let's think about this in terms, again, of your characters. Of course, you're going to have main characters who you're going to follow throughout the entire story. It's basically their story, but a story isn't fun if we're just focusing on 1 or 2 individuals and that's all we ever get. A story comes to life through the interactions and lives of your cast of characters. And the more characters you have, the more potential you have, the more fun you can have. you need to make sure that even though you're focusing on your main characters to help move everything along, that you're giving plenty of time and spotlights and highlights and opportunities to your side characters, so that way you can expand on their personalities, their backstories, their interactions, their relationships, and this is what brings a story to life. Something that I love that Nate said long ago, and I still keep coming back to it: a story lives or dies by its characters. And if you only focus on a couple of characters, chances are that you are going to risk losing your audience, because these characters might not end up being all that interesting by the end of the day, especially if they're just kind of existing in a vacuum, doing their own heroic things. Having way more characters, having a good solid cast of supporting characters that the audience gets to know and love through all these various interactions, scenes, and relationships, that adds so much spice and life to the story that it feels way more real, engaging, and interesting. Lesson number 2, when it comes to play by post, this is inherent with all of the problems of trying to carry on a long, deep conversation via text. You know that you cannot convey nuance or emotion or anything like that through text, even with all these other various kinds of emojis, because without the inflections in someone's voice, especially without being able to see the person and getting to read their body language and getting all the vibes, it's so easy to misinterpret things and to have all kinds of miscommunications. Now, I have said in the past that miscommunications within community storytelling and even within your own story can be a whole lot of fun if you know how to wrangle it. However, when you have people from all over the world, different languages, different cultures, different time zones, and blah, 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 all trying to come together, and you are losing so much nuance and so much information because you're just communicating via text, it is so easy to have bad miscommunications and to, through these misunderstandings, drive wedges into the group. Luckily, within my group, we've been able to work out all of those rough patches as they've come along, but it does require time and effort that, of course, most people would rather be using for the game. So, what can we then learn from this? Well, communication is indeed key. And as an author, you are going to have to communicate with loads of people. You're going to be communicating with your beta readers, with your writing group. If you're lucky enough to get picked up by traditional publishers, you're going to be communicating with your publishers, with your editors, and with other people who are within their orbit who are going to help make your story come to life. And then you're going to have to communicate with the people that you're trying to sell your books to. You're going to have to communicate with outlets. You're going to have to communicate with reviewers. You're going to have to communicate with people who will want to interview you for your work. And you're going to have to communicate with people who are just, well, somewhat curious about what you do for a living. And knowing how to speak in all those instances, developing good communication skills is entirely essential to being a successful author. And yes, there's a lot of authors out there who are awkward ducks, who have helpers to navigate them through all of these various interactions. But that still means that someone needs to have good communication skills, and you can't always rely on some publicist to be hanging on your elbow around your shoulder and be all like, okay, this is what you're supposed to do in this situation. No, take the time and the effort, be a little awkward at times, apologize, make some mistakes, have a few gaffes to learn how to properly communicate with other people. This is a very important skill to have for your success as an author. Lesson number 3 from this play-by-post campaign thus far: know your canon. Know your rules. It is so easy, again, when everyone is spread on out and everyone's just communicating as they can via post, to forget and to lose very important information about character developments, world building, the rules of playing Dungeons and Dragons. In a play-by-post, probably even more so than when you're just meeting in person, you can quickly be like, oh, what was that one thing that we went through? You will want to take notes. If you're not taking any notes, if you're not backing up all of your communiques, it's so easy to lose vital information. Weirdly enough, in a play-by-post where it should be easy to just scroll and find stuff, well, there's always so much going on, it's easy to lose that important information. I have found myself more often than not lost in this campaign than in any other campaign, and that's not because I'm not trying to pay attention. It's just there's just so much information, so many characters, so much going on, and the posts here and there and everywhere. And so you need to be taking notes. You need to make sure that you understand the canon of events. What has actually happened? What have characters shared? What have characters done? What is happening in the world? And what are the elements of this world? And how do the rules of Dungeons & Dragons apply to this fantasy world that we are all helping together to build up through our interactions? The same goes for when you're writing. You need to know your canon. You need to understand the sequence of events. You need to have a proper timeline. Even if you are a discovery writer, someone who's just, you got your idea and you're going to plow right on ahead, you need to be able to go back and you need to be able to get the proper sequence of events. You need to understand where you've come from and how you got to where you are now within your story, so that way you can keep things, well, coherent. That way they don't just all fall apart. It's so easy. Even when you have canon, even when you have world building notes and everything, it's so easy to fall apart and make mistakes. So make sure that you are adhering to your canon, because if you deviate from your canon events, from your canon characters, and from your world building aspects, your audience is going to recognize what is going on and they are going to lose interest because they're going to get lost. And you know what? You as the author as well can get lost. It happens all the time. You're like, how did I get to this chapter again? Why does this character act this way again? And you got to go back, and it's so frustrating to find it there somewhere in the text of your story. Better to have notes set aside so that way you understand without having to search around in the sea of words to know where you got lost. Lesson number 4, collaborative storytelling. This is what I love about Dungeons & Dragons, and in the play-by-post, I've begun to see even better, actually, just how important it is to have that collaborative effort between people, where you rely on others to help you tell the story, and that you rely on others to challenge you to help you tell the story. Effectively, within this campaign, we have multiple authors, more or less, coming together to try to tell a story. Each of us bringing in our own ideas, our own understanding, the canon, the world building elements, our ideas for what we can do with these characters, and then we begin playing it out. And again, no one person takes control of the entire story and tries to steer it away. And when that happens, well, then there's backlash and things start coming apart. You have to rely on the others to help you tell the story. This can be incredibly frustrating. This can feel like I'm not getting to the things that I really wanted to do. Well, this is collaboration. And there are actually plenty of authors who try to collaborate with others in order to make their stories happen. But normally then what happens is that one person has the ideas and the other person does all the work. And that's just laziness. Instead, what we have playing out right here, and this is what authors who wish to do collaborations should focus on, is that rather than handing off one chapter or one idea or one character to one person and just being like, okay, you make sure that you write that, and then I'm going to go write this. Instead, what should be done is that the authors come together and then through their understandings of these characters, play out and write out these scenes together. Challenge and support each other, bicker and argue, get over it, compromise, and allow the story and the characters to flow together by working together rather than just passing it all off to one person. Because again, so many authors, and especially novice authors, try to do this. I have this idea, but I'm not a really good author. You are a really good author, so let me give you the idea, all the world building elements, and I want you to write my idea for me. I don't know how many times I've been asked to do that, where people are like, Lars, can you just write my story for me? No, I can't, because it's your story, and if I write it, it's going to then become my story in a bastardized version of your own, and I'm not as invested in what you want as much as what I want to write. So when it comes to collaborative storytelling, 2 authors or more should come together, talk about who their characters are, the world that they want to play in, what they want to do, and then together write it all out via interactions with each other. This is truly collaborative storytelling. And lesson number 5, it is so easy to go meta in play-by-post. More meta than, even more so than when you're together with everyone else at the table. And I think it's because you have way more time to interact in play-by-post. If you have questions, if you're wondering what's going on, if you have theories, you've got the time because you're waiting up to hours for someone else to post, that you can then go and you can do the research, you can find out about these monsters, you can do theory crafting, you can comb through all of the notes, and then you come back hours later and you're like, I have all this information, I am endowed with power from on high, and then you make a choice through your character that they might not have actually have made otherwise, or introduce an element that these characters should not know in order to be awesome in the moment. It's so easy to go meta in play by post, and we've joked about it quite often, like, oh my gosh, the meta, and it's so easy even then, even when you're trying to avoid it, to still get maybe a little bit more meta than you ought to. In the campaign that we're right now in, because I was interested, well, how are we going to save this person who's been turned into a vampire? Went on a rabbit hole's worth of research to figure out what you can do to cure someone within the basic rules of D&D from vampirism. Found some really cool stuff, but there's no way that my character should know any of that. But as the player, I'm like, oh, I want to explore this, I want to do it, but I can't just suddenly give my character all of that information, and it's going to take forever for us to get there, and it's so dang frustrating. Like, I want to give you advice and little tips. You can't do that, because again, that kind of that ruins the experience of your characters being challenged and failing and then succeeding and growing. The meta is so easy to just stuff there into the game. And while there are some people who are trying to win the game of Dungeons & Dragons, that's not what Dungeons & Dragons is about. It's not about winning the game. It is about developing your characters and going on a shared storytelling experience together. That is what you're supposed to do. Now then, the same thing can actually happen when you are writing your own books as an author. Especially when you are an architect writer or a Hanging Gardens of Babylon author, like I like to describe myself, where I have a very stringent set of ideas of what I want to have happen, but then I'm willing to let my characters learn and grow, be a little bit loosey-goosey, and just see how they develop along the way. Well, especially when you have that particular approach, your characters are going to grow and do things in ways that are going to surprise you as an author, as you discover them, as you write. But then suddenly your characters are off doing one thing, and the plot demands that they be doing another. And then you, as the author, are like, I am going to wrangle you and fit you into my perfect parameters and schematics, so that way the story is exactly what I intended it to be from the beginning. There you have it. But then, when you actually start reading through your story, once you've done that, it feels so unnatural. Because you're like, wait a second, the character was off doing this thing. They were clearly on a trajectory to go to this city. Why are they suddenly now in this city? This doesn't make any sense. They made this choice on a whim. And whenever you do this as an author, it stings the audience. And for me, one of the greatest examples of this actually comes from Ruby, from the transition from Volume 4 to Volume 5. Volume 4, when you go back and look at it, it is incredibly heavily implied, if not outright stated, that Yang is going off to find Ruby. She's not going to find her mother. She made the choice to support her sister and go after her sister. Volume 5 takes happy-go-lucky Yang, who is choosing to go after Ruby with a big smile on her face, and we are introduced to her in the very next volume at the very beginning, scowling, angry at the entire world, and she's not out going after Ruby, she's going after her mother. So that way she can kind of stick it to her mother, pick up Weiss, because plot reasons, and then, holy cow, with the magical powers that Raven has, you can now meet up with Ruby, and it feels like such a massive plot contrivance rather than a cool reveal that it eliminates so much of the fun, the mystery, and the adventure that Yang as a character should be going on. It just stings, and you can feel how this has just been forced in. It hasn't even been shoehorned in, it's been forced in, and it just sucks. So then, what are you supposed to do? Well, then this comes down to you as the author getting a little bit creative, because you want your characters to have a certain amount of autonomy. You want them to actually grow as individuals and not just simply stick to exactly what you've said they would do, because that then could easily reduce them to just being automatons that adhere to the plot and that can take away what makes them potentially very interesting. You want your characters to have a certain amount of autonomy within the story, but then you as the author, you can get creative by introducing side characters, various world events, and you can also explore through certain discussions and dialogue why they may seem to be set on a trajectory to city A, they really should revert to city B, which is what your story called for all along. And this can then bring out greater depth of the characters. This can actually help you introduce even more world building in fun, creative ways. And this is what we do in Dungeons & Dragons. The Dungeon Master can, of course, easily take control of the entire game and force the party to do what they want them to do, but that's not fun for anyone, even for the Dungeon Master. Instead, the Dungeon Master has to get creative and help the characters realize that this is maybe the route they want to go on, but ultimately leave it up to the characters and to the players. The fun thing with being an author as opposed to being in a D&D group is that you as the author have way more power and control to make that happen and make that happen way more seamlessly rather than being the Dungeon Master who's dropping all these hints and bombs and characters and whatnot to try to lead you through a very obvious breadcrumb trail to where it is that you're supposed to go. So there you have it. 5 lessons from a play-by-post game of Dungeons & Dragons, and finally, a video about Dungeons & Dragons brought to you by Camille's Harem, and hopefully 5 lessons that will help you out as an author from learning how to from the necessity to communicate with others, also understanding you shouldn't just be communicating via text, speech and in person, way better, to giving your characters a little bit more autonomy, collaborative efforts, and everything like that. And hopefully this is giving you some inspiration for what you can do in your own stories and what you can do within your own games. And if you realize that, oh, I've been doing some things wrong, then hey, this is your call to change things around, because you can always improve and make things better. And because I have made the promise to do so, I will indeed in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later, have a video for Delicious in Dungeon, because that was an absolutely fun, bonkers D&D story all based around food, and I've got some fun things to say about that. So if you're interested in that particular video when it comes out, then please make sure that you've subscribed and clicked the bell notification to receive, or the bell icon to receive the notifications for when that video comes out. But otherwise, if you'd like to support the work that we do here at Camille's Harem in trying to help out other novice authors and bring our insights and experiences to you here on the interwebs, then please make sure that you've subscribed. And if you would really like to help us out, please check out the books that we have published. Links for them are in the description below. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.